It was one of those quiet nights. I had just gotten out of a stressful week at work and needed a drink. The kind of drink that'd take the edge off and let me forget the world for a little while. I wasn't looking for company, just a seat at the bar, a glass of whiskey, and the silence of the dimly lit room to help me unwind. I walked into the local dive bar around 9 p.m. The low hum of the jukebox and the clink of glasses were the only sounds, and it wasn't crowded. I sat at the far end of the bar where there was an empty seat, ordered my drink, and let the glass warm my hand. Then he walked in. At first, I didn't pay much attention to him. He was just another guy, maybe in his mid-40s, unremarkable in every way except for one thing. He kept staring at me. It wasn't a casual glance, but an intense, unblinking stare from across the room. I tried to ignore it, but it was hard not to feel his eyes on me. I thought maybe he was just drunk, or perhaps waiting for someone, but it became uncomfortable. When I'd look up from my drink, his eyes would shift away, only for them to return to me moments later. His face didn't change much, just a neutral expression, but there was something cold about him, like he wasn't really there. After a while, he finally made his way over. I could hear his footsteps approaching, slow and deliberate. He stopped at the seat next to mine and gave me a nod before sitting down. "You're new here?" he asked, his voice surprisingly soft. I shook my head, not wanting to engage, but trying to be polite. "No, I come here sometimes, just looking for a quiet drink." His eyes flickered, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. "I can tell. You look tired." It was an odd thing to say, but I let it slide, hoping he wouldn't say anything else. But of course, he did. "You ever feel like you're just waiting? Like life is just one big pause, and you're stuck in it?" His words were strangely philosophical, but what unsettled me was how dead his eyes seemed. No warmth, no feeling. I was about to answer when the bartender, a guy named Rick, placed another drink in front of me. I gave Rick a quick nod of thanks, hoping it would end the conversation. But the stranger wasn't finished. "I see a lot of people like you," he said, leaning closer. "People who are waiting for something, for a sign, maybe, or a reason to move forward. But sometimes it's not about waiting. Sometimes you're just stuck." There was an eerie calm in his tone, like he knew something I didn't. Do you come here often?" I asked, trying to steer the conversation to something normal. He didn't respond right away. Instead, he stared at me, almost like he was searching for something in my face. Then, with a slow, deliberate motion, he leaned in even closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "I know you're afraid of it. You should be." A chill ran down my spine. I didn't understand what he meant, but I was starting to feel the unmistakable sensation of dread creeping into my bones. The room suddenly felt colder, the air heavier. My heart started to race, and I felt like I couldn't breathe properly. Without thinking, I stood up, excusing myself quickly. "I need to go to the bathroom," I muttered, almost stumbling over my words. I wasn't sure if he even heard me, but as I walked past him, I felt his eyes boring into my back. The whole time I was in the bathroom, I couldn't shake the feeling that he was still watching me. I tried to steady my nerves, splashing cold water on my face, but it didn't help. Something was wrong. When I returned to the bar, the man was gone. But I noticed something strange. My drink was gone too, and there, in its place, was a note, folded neatly and carefully placed where my glass had been. I hesitated for a long moment before opening it. The note read, in jagged handwriting, "You were never meant to leave. My stomach dropped. My skin went cold. I scanned the room, but the man wasn't there anymore. The bartender was busy in the back, and the other patrons seemed oblivious to what had just happened. I left the bar quickly, not even finishing my drink, and drove home in a daze. The entire night replayed in my mind over and over. Who was he? What did he mean by that note? And why did I feel like he knew something about me? Something only I should have known. That was weeks ago, but I haven't been able to shake the feeling. Every time I drive by that bar now, I feel a chill run through me. Like he's still there, watching from the shadows, waiting. And sometimes, when I'm alone in the dark at night, I'll hear a knock on the door. But when I open it, no one is there. I don't know if he's still out there, or if I'm just imagining things, but I can't escape the feeling that the man from that bar is still watching, waiting, and one day he'll be back. It was supposed to be a fun night. Just a quick drink with a few friends at a bar I'd never been to before. The place had a cozy vibe, with dim lights and jazz music that gave it a classy, almost vintage feel. I was feeling good after a few cocktails and a bit of laughter. The buzz was just enough to make me forget about work and life for a while. That's when I met him. He was sitting at the bar, casually sipping on a whiskey, wearing a dark jacket and a quiet smile. I noticed him immediately, not because he was particularly handsome, but because there was something magnetic about him, something that made me feel like I couldn't look away. He smiled when I caught his gaze, and I returned it, not thinking much of it. But he kept staring, not in a creepy way, more like he was trying to figure me out. I wasn't one to normally engage with strangers. The alcohol in my system made me a little bolder, so I moved closer. "Hi," I said, sliding onto the bar stool next to him. "You look like you're in deep thought." He laughed softly, a low, smooth sound. "Just enjoying the night," he replied. "And now I have some company." We exchanged small talk at first. He was charming, attentive, and surprisingly funny. Everything felt casual, like two people who just happened to meet at a bar. The conversation flowed easily, and before I knew it, we were laughing like old friends. He offered to buy me another drink, and I accepted without hesitation. By the time my friends were ready to leave, I found myself standing there still chatting with him, the time slipping away unnoticed. The bar was quieter now, and there was a strange shift in the air. The noise had died down, leaving just the two of us in this small bubble of conversation. "You know," he said, his voice lowering, "I could walk you home if you'd like. It's late, and it's not safe for a beautiful woman like you to be alone." It was a kind offer, and I was drunk enough to not think twice. So I agreed, slipping my coat on as we left the bar together. He led me down the empty streets, the cool night air brushing against my face, which felt oddly refreshing after the stifling warmth of the bar. But somewhere along the way, things started to feel off. At first, I thought it was just my head, spinning from the alcohol. But as we walked, he kept glancing at me, his eyes more intense than before, like he was studying me, evaluating me in ways that made me uncomfortable. I quickened my pace, but he matched it effortlessly, staying just a step behind me. "I've always liked this part of town," he said, his voice almost too quiet. "It's so peaceful, so isolated." I turned to him, sensing the subtle shift in his tone. "Yeah, I guess. I live just up ahead. It's not far." His lips curled into a smile, but it didn't feel warm anymore. It felt like he knew something I didn't. something that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. "Good," he replied. "I'm not in a hurry. I like the quiet." I didn't want to be rude, but there was no mistaking it now. Something wasn't right. My stomach churned. This wasn't the charming guy I'd been talking to at the bar. This man felt different. He was too close now, his body language shifting, becoming more predatory. Suddenly, the streetlights flickered above us, casting long shadows on the pavement. The quiet, empty street felt suffocating, the air thick with a kind of silence that made my heart race. I needed to get away. "Hey, thanks for the walk, but I'm almost home now," I said, my voice trying to sound casual. "I'll be fine from here." But before I could move, he reached out and grabbed my arm, his grip tight, too tight. His touch sent a chill through my body. "You're not going anywhere," he said, his voice cold and low. "I've been waiting for this." My heart stopped. The realization hit me like a slap to the face. I had made a terrible mistake. What are you talking about?" I stammered, panic rising in my chest. I pulled against his grip, but he only tightened it, pulling me closer, his breath hot on my ear. "I knew you were the one the moment I saw you," he whispered, his words making my skin crawl. "You think you're safe, but you're not. Not anymore." I froze, the world narrowing into a tunnel of fear. I couldn't think. My mind was racing, my body paralyzed by his presence. He began to drag me down a side street, away from the main road, away from the lights, and everything inside me screamed for me to break free. In that moment, I remembered something my mother had always told me. Trust your instincts. And right then, my instinct screamed that I was in real danger. With every ounce of strength I had left, I wrenched myself away from him and ran. My heart hammered in my chest as I sprinted through the dark, the sound of his footsteps echoing behind me. But I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. I ran until I reached a busy street, where the bright lights of a late-night diner washed over me. Only then did I look back, and when I did, I saw him standing at the end of the alley, just watching me. He didn't move. He didn't say a word. He just stood there, a shadow in the night. I didn't wait to see if he would follow. I ran inside the diner, locking the door behind me, and collapsed into a booth, shaking uncontrollably. The police never found him. When I tried to report the incident, the only thing I had was a description of his face. No name, no identity. It's been weeks since that night, but I can't shake the feeling that he's still out there, that he's still watching, waiting. And every time I hear footsteps behind me, my pulse quickens. I'm constantly looking over my shoulder, wondering if he'll find me again. Because deep down, I know one thing for sure. He's not done with me yet.